Welcome, everyone. My name is Patricia Kranz. I'm the executive director of the Overseas Press Club of America. And tonight we're delighted to have another in our series of How I Did It, which this one is going to be very entertaining because we have cartoonists talking about how they do their work. And the three cartoonists that we have all won Overseas Press Club awards. Kevin, known as KAL, Kallaugher. By my count, he's won four OPC awards. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Kal.
Wow.
And over the last several years. And then we have Rob Rogers, who by my research has won 2 awards. And Patrick Chappatte, who won very recently, a couple years ago. Oh, yeah, sorry about my dog. Had won a couple years ago. So we are delighted to have everybody, and I'm going to turn it over to Kal. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Patricia. So great to be here. And also a great honor for us cartoonists to be having an event sponsored by the Overseas Press Club. It's such an honor when we get together at the annual banquet for us cartoonists to be recognized shoulder to shoulder with the brave journalists around the world who invest their lives and sometimes lose their lives in the pursuit of truth and justice. And we are so delighted and honored to be with them, be awarded by them, and also to be here to give a little insight into our world, the world of cartoons. Now, many people have some notions of what journalists do, but so many people don't have any idea about what cartoonists do. And in order to give a little peek behind the curtain, I've invited 2 of my favorite cartoonists and good colleagues come share a little bit about their world and to answer your questions about what it's like to be a cartoonist. So way we're going to do tonight is that I've asked each of them to just find 5 cartoons that are just a small sampling of their enormous bodies of work to give a little insight into their job. Then we're going to follow each cartoonist's little portfolio with one selection from the other 2 chaps who are here to tell a little bit about their views and their observations about their cartoon colleague. And the 3 of us will have this opportunity. And then we're going to open the floor for questions. People can leave questions in the chat and I will try to draw them into our conversation. And we have some other things to share with you later. All in all, this is going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully, like any good cartoon, entertaining, informative, and memorable. So with that in mind, I am now going to...
First, Kal, can I, do you allow a little correction? Because I just want to say very proudly that I got actually 3 times the Overseas Press Club Award. So very happy to get them. And
congratulations.
I am so sorry, Patrick.
No problem. And in this conversation, at the invitation of the Overseas Press Club, I'm going to do the overseas part because I'm joining you from Geneva in the middle of the night, and very happy to be with you.
That's true. That's right. It's nearly 11 o'clock in the evening there. So as a result, we're going to ask you to go first, Patrick. But first, let me call up the slides. I'm going to share my screen with everybody so you can see the slides. And then I'm going to give a formal introduction to the great Patrick Chappatte here. Hold on. Let me get this up and shared here so I can get this thing for all to enjoy. And here we are off to the races. So Patrick, here's his very impressive resume. He is the editorial cartoonist and comics reporter working currently for Der Spiegel in Germany, Le Canard Enchaîné in France, Le Temps and Neue Zürcher Zeitung in Switzerland, and the Boston Globe. I was contracted to be the cartoonist for the International Herald Tribune that then became the New York Times for almost 20 years until they decided to stop publishing cartoons in 2019. He's also the president of the Geneva-based Freedom Cartoonists Foundation. Now, Patrick, I'm going to hand the microphone to you.
Okay, thank you, Cal. I'm so happy to, and so honored to be with you, two of my favorite cartoonists. And you know, I'm a fan of both of you. So very happy to be with you in the middle of the night in Geneva. Let's go through a few cartoons, and I'm just looking forward to having a conversation between the three of us. You know, very often in this job, topics tend to collide. So in the same week that the Taliban decided to bring back the burqa, something else happened, and maybe you can show us my first cartoon, which actually made a little collision between the two news. Yes, from Afghanistan, and you know, things happened in the United States as well with the news coming from the Supreme Court. I don't do that very often. It's a staple of political cartooning to take two topics and to mix them, especially when they're not related. So maybe, you know, maybe I thought there was some sort of a link here. Anyway, something happened in our profession over the course of the last years. I think that's something I never saw before. A single theme, a single topic that sucked up all the oxygen. And I'm not talking about Trump, I'm talking about COVID. I think all of us have been pretty much working on COVID for almost 2 years. And then came what? The war in Ukraine. So let me show you one of my latest cartoons that I did, I think 10 days ago. If you can bring this up. Oh, this one. Yeah, that's, you know, that's one of the few cartoons I'm happy about, maybe 1 out of 10, because it's such a simple visual image, right? And a visual idea synthesizes things in a second. Your gut understands it even before your brain processes it. And the beauty with a cartoon without words is that it can jump borders. So that cartoon was published in the Washington Post, in France, in Germany, and that's the beauty of it. And if you go back a few weeks, I guess 3 weeks before that, we can see the cartoon that I did on a very special day, February 23, 2022. If you can show that one. You guys remember, I think it was so striking to see the pictures of those guys in the trenches, those boys literally in the trenches. And that was published the day the war broke out. So I did this cartoon the day before, and I think it's just one of those very poignant moments, heartbreaking moment. It's like it's a dreamlike image. You see yourself, you imagine yourself in the skin of this young Ukrainian soldier looking through his telescope, and what is he seeing? Well, he sees the past coming to him. We could feel on that day, February 23, that the war would break out. I could not imagine it would break out in a matter of hours. But so that's the moment that's the cartoon that I did at this very seminal moment. And you know, guys, you know as well as me, in this job, the trivial collides with the meaningful, the geopolitical competes with the lighter issues. So let's look at another topic, much lighter. And that's the next cartoon I'm going to show. It's about, which one is it? I forgot. Show me, Cal, which one is the next
It's
one?
the COVID.
No, that's a deep one. That's a somber one. And that's a cartoon that sums up, I think, a long period of our lives, of our time, a period that was shared by all of us on the same planet. And that's of the, 500 cartoons I did during this period of time, I don't know. That's one of my favorite cartoons because it's just an image of the eclipse of our lives that this long crisis was. A time that was at the same time very personal and felt all around the world. Quite unique moment of time. And I'm going to end up with on a lighter note with a divorce. I don't usually do cartoons about gossips or the royals, not very often. But you know, we had the divorce of the century, Bill and Melinda Gates, and I'm giving you the real reason of why they split up. And this was for my little cartoon presentation.
Thanks, Patrick. That's really great. Now, now it's my turn where I get to talk about Patrick a little bit. So I chose a cartoon, which I'm going to really slur because it's in German, and I'm not even going to try. I am not even going to try to say, but the cartoon also, by the way, appeared in French. And maybe I can do this one a little bit better, but I think we can all see what's going on here on the television screen. There's a discussion about the Russians launching a nuclear test, or the prospects of nuclear weapons being used in Ukraine. And the girl says that, well, will the nuclear winter reduce the problem of global warming? Wow. Which is a great cartoon, whether it's in English and French or German.
It's and much funnier in German, I must say.
Well, the thing is that what the thing that is amazing to me, it's hard enough to be a cartoonist to come up with consistent work over a long period of time, but Patrick manages to do it in 3 languages, and so that he's got these Swiss superpower of being able, not only do you be able to speak different languages, think in different languages, but actually employ humor and sarcasm and all these other tricky things. So for me, that I think there's nobody in the world that can do that. And the next cartoon is Rob.
Cal, I need to tell you a secret. Because it's just the 3 of us, right? So actually, I can do English. I lived in the States for a long time, recently in Los Angeles. And I can do that. But in German, to tell you the truth, I don't work directly in German. I use English with my German newsrooms. And then I have a good sense of German. I can see when their translation is not so good. But to be totally honest, I work, let's say, in 2 languages.
Well, I'm going to just even explore that a little bit more, because I work in 2 languages, English and American. This is, I think, remember that Winston Churchill says that there are 2 countries divided by a common language. But that you must find that then it's not just that you're translating jokes one to the other, but there's a nature of humor. There's a nature, of course, there's cultural references that are unique. But that, for you to shift into the gear to work with a French audience is quite different than an English audience. Am I right?
Yeah, that's true. Especially in France, there's a special sense of humor. Otherwise, I'm working for a type of newspapers, like quality newspapers, that have the same kind of educated readership. And so the difference are not so big between the audience, let's say, of the New York Times, Le Temps in Geneva, or the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, which you almost pronounced perfectly just earlier.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to pass this over to you, Rob, the next cartoon of Patrick's.
Yes. So Patrick, this cartoon, and this is not the full cartoon, but I'm going to pause here for a second. When I saw this cartoon, it was done in an animated form, and Patrick reminded me that this was from around 2007. And I was familiar with Patrick's work, but this blew me away. And when I saw this cartoon, it was animated. So this is how it started out. It started out as, you see this family or these people in the car, and they're frightened by this giant cloud of toxic, fumes coming. And then now hit the next panel, and you see what it is that they're actually upset about. This and the great thing about this cartoon is that it doesn't need to be in any language. It's universal. So there you go. And I just loved the drawing of this and the way that it circled around and just really spelled it out so well. And the problem with this cartoon, Patrick, is that it meant that I could never do an environmental cartoon that would ever live up to this. And so it ruined my life for me. I just want you to know that. But anyway, I've always loved this cartoon.
Yeah, it's one of the cartoons I like. And the interesting thing about this is that simple is difficult. I remember it took me 2 hours. I was looking for ideas for 2 hours. I wanted to convey this very simple image of climate change or pollution or all those perturbations caused by human activity. And I came up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different ideas. And at some point I got so desperate and I thought there must be a simple way to show that. And after 2 hours of very hard work and desperation, I came up with this. So simple is not easy.
No, you're right. In fact,
And
there's
you
this
know that.
great cartoon anecdote story based in the UK. I can't speak exactly for its veracity, but it's got a good story to it. It evidently took place about a century ago. The cartoonist in question was Phil May. And after work one day, he went down to the pub. And there was a group of 3 editors who approached him and said, Phil, you get paid a lot of money for your cartoons. And the last one had only 7 lines in it. And he thought for a moment and he said, if I could have done it in 5 lines, I would have charged twice as much. So that's kind of where we are in our business.
That's true.
Now I'm on to somebody's name who I can definitely pronounce. This is Rob Rogers. And Rob, let me tell everybody a little bit about you. Rob Rogers is the former political cartoonist for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. After 25 years and many, 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 many awards, including the OPC's Cartooning Award, Rob was fired in 2018 by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette management for drawing cartoons critical of President Trump. Rob continues to draw political cartoons for counterpoint.com and tinyview.com, and he is syndicated by Andrews McNeil Syndication. Take it away, Rob.
All right. So I'm going to start out with showing you a photograph because people are always interested in how we come up with ideas. Most of the time, it's kind of what Patrick described, where you're sitting with your sketchbook and you're slaving over ideas and writing down as many topics as you can think of, and then going and sitting and staring out the window or whatever it is for you. And that's usually the way it goes. But once in a while, once in a blue moon, the creative cartoon gods give us a gift. And okay, so one day I'm watching cable news, and Netanyahu is speaking at the United Nations. So you can show the photograph. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister. Here he is speaking, and he's talking about Iran and the nuclear threat of Iran. And so I was so like flabbergasted when he brought up this image, this diagram that he brought with him, audio visual. And I thought, oh my God, it looks like a Warner Brothers cartoon bomb, and so I came up with this idea almost instantly. Let's show the next slide. We have the Iranian President Ahmadinejad, and he's sitting around the table saying, okay, who leaked our nuclear bomb design to Netanyahu? And of course it says Acme because that's the Warner Brothers cartoons. And there's Wile E. Coyote looking very, very guilty there. And this is just a way to point out that sometimes the ideas do come quicker than others, although we all have to have that history. Like, I watched hours and hours of Warner Brothers cartoons, so my mind is warped that way. But the other thing I wanted to point out is, as cartoonists, one of the things we do is we offer some levity and some humor to issues like nuclear holocaust, and that's really kind of one of the thrilling things about the job. It's not that we can always make a joke about something, because some issues are much more serious than others. But sometimes it's such a nice departure when we can, with all the bad news going on, we can make people laugh. So I really enjoy that part of the job so much. And so in keeping with that theme, the next cartoon is also about nuclear annihilation. And this was our previous president when he was meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. And here he is saying, "You're an unhinged, childish nuclear despot with insane hair." And Kim says, "I know you are, but what am I?" And this cartoon, obviously this was a very serious issue that here we have these two nuclear leaders with their fingers on the buttons, and they're both a little bit crazy. But people loved it, and they laughed at this cartoon, and I got a lot of people saying good things about it. The next cartoon is also a cartoon where I employ humor to get across a subject that is very difficult. This is when the Pope Benedict at the time, when they first got a Twitter account. And so here he is saying, OMG, this 21st century technology is great for spreading my 15th century views on gays, women, and contraception, LOL. And my favorite part there is hashtag say 10 Hail Marys. But you know, this idea that the church was going through all of these scandals, not to mention, you know, the pedophile priest scandals that they were dealing with and covering up, and yet their views on women and everything else and contraception. So these are difficult topics. And, you know, we do sometimes do cartoons about people that are revered, and people get very upset about it. But in this case, this is one of the few, what I call my Pope cartoons, one of the few Pope cartoons that didn't get me into trouble or get killed by my publisher. But yes, so this is kind of a way to sort of find some humor in something that is otherwise oppressive, really. Okay, but not everything is funny. So let's go to the next cartoon. This is a 4-panel cartoon that I did about Syria. Let's wait for it to come up here. So we all remember the graphic photographs of the boy on the beach, and then the boy that was you know, in the airplane when he was recovered, when he was rescued, and so Russia's bombing, and then, you know, the end result was that you know, nothing was done, and you know, and so we still have Syria in a lot of trouble. And I think that the reason I drew this cartoon is not to point blame at any one individual, but to sort of say, you know, cartoonists are just like everybody else in the world. We feel helpless to not be able to do anything, and so this is kind of what we can do, is to sort of draw more attention to an issue and point out you know, the inhumanities that are happening. And so to bring it full circle, I drew a similar cartoon about what's happening in Ukraine right now, also involving Russia. So if you could show the next one. And,
is it up there?
I'm not seeing it yet, but.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is just sort of a 4-panel, or the first 3 panels are all about places where Russia was involved in you know, what one might call war crimes. So the first one, I call it an atrocity. Syria, I call it a war crime. Ukraine, I call it genocide. And here's NATO saying, I call it none of my business. And this wasn't meant to be a funny cartoon, but it was just sort of meant to show how you know, how it seems like, because, you know, especially because Russia has nuclear weapons, that's sort of the theme here. Nuclear weapons and condoms, I guess, would you say with the Pope? But that's sort of the theme here, is just the idea that when nuclear weapons are involved, it's not as easy to just sort of send in troops or send in weapons to make a difference. So, but I do like the idea of sort of giving a historical arc to things sometimes, and that can be a fun way to get an idea across.
Well, thanks, Rob.
Sure.
I've got a cartoon of yours I want to share.
Okay.
And the thing is that all the people, you've shown these handful of cartoons, which is just a small spattering of your countless cartoons you've created over your career. And the cartoon I have here is from back in 1988 and has a debate
Oh, wow.
between Michael Dukakis and the then US President George H.W. Bush. And, you know, the cartoon's got a joke that still works today, where Dukakis says, when was the War of 1812? And Bush says, oh no, a trick question. And the thing is that, Rob, it was so amazing to me, the criteria, or shall I say one of the criteria to me that makes a cartoonist amazing, special, and worthy of an enormous respect is one that has a long track record, because basically any reasonable cartoonist should come up with a half dozen, maybe even 10 good cartoons in a year. If you're doing, many, hundreds maybe in a year, but to do them consistently good year in, year out, in Rob's case, decade out, is astonishing. And Rob has been doing amazing work all this time. So this is my way of saluting you.
True.
And thanking you for letting me show this cartoon again.
Well, I appreciate it. And when you told me you were going to show me this cartoon, I went back and looked up the story. So the story is that George H.W. Bush was speaking to a group, and I think it was a veterans group, and he said, remember Pearl Harbor, this is Pearl Harbor Day, but it was September 7th, 1988. And so there were people in the crowd going, no. And he finally realized his mistake. But of course, cartoonists had a field day with it. And so this one was one of the ones I did about him debating, with the trick question.
Well, and now Patrick, you've got the cartoon you want to talk about.
I have 100 cartoons from Rob I want to show, but I had to pick only one. So for me, Rob, you are the definition of the job of the political cartoonist. Your cartoons like this one are very political, opinionated, hard-hitting, to the point. And you did this cartoon in a context that you need to describe to us, because it was a cartoon that was part of a series of cartoons that were killed by your editor. Tell us the story behind that cartoon, please.
So I'll try to make this brief, but my publisher, who for 25 years had left me alone pretty much and had patted me on the back every time I came into the office, had decided that he liked Donald Trump. And so there was talk of an endorsement, and my editor basically walked away from the paper because he didn't want to endorse Trump. Anyway, I lasted about 2 years, and then the publisher hired an editor to replace the other editor, and he was basically hired to change the page over to be more conservative, and also I think to get me in line. And we did try to work together. I would change my ideas often. But just to give you an example, most years I would have 1 or 2 cartoons killed, often about the Pope, by the way, but because Pittsburgh's very Catholic. But in this 3-month period that I had this editor, he killed 19 cartoons. So that gives you a sense of how they were really cracking down on me to try to get me in line, to change my viewpoints, basically, even though I was hired to do these cartoons. So this week that I did this one, I was going away to the NCS, the National Cartoonist Society meeting, and this cartoon was for Memorial Day, and I drew it, and then I sent it in, and I was on my way. I was in the car driving to Philadelphia for the NCS when my editor called me and said, "Sorry, we're not running that one. It's too harsh." And then that was the cascading from there. There were 6 in a row that week that had been killed. And then the following week I was fired. Every day I tried to contact them and talk to them on the phone or email and ask them, what's going on? Can't we meet and talk about this? But they had their head sort of in this space where they wanted me to either shape up or ship out. So I left. Well, I was fired, but
too bad for them.
Yes.
That's too bad for them. That's a real shame. Real shame. Well, I just want to take this opportunity to remind anyone who has questions for any of us that you can drop them in the chat, and we will be turning over to those in a few minutes. First, I guess I'm up next. Rob, do you want to introduce me?
Yes, I have this stellar introduction written by somebody, I'm not sure who, but Kevin Kallaugher, KAL, is the editorial cartoonist for the Economist magazine of London, the Baltimore Sun, and Counterpoint. In a career that spans 44 years, KAL has published over 10,000 cartoons and 150 magazine covers. His resume includes 6 collections of published work, exhibitions in 12 countries, awards and honors in 7. So there you go.
There you go. Thank you,
Our
Mr.
host
Rob. Thank you.
and fantastic cartoonist, Kal.
Well, I've just got a handful of stuff here. I just wanted to start by saying, I started with The Economist right out of school. And during that time had the great opportunity to draw, all the major heads of state and probably cover every major story around the globe for the past 4 decades. A few cartoons here. I'm going to start off with this one about 10 years of American foreign policy right after 9/11. I did it in 5 panels, 10 years of foreign policy. Here's the first panel. We're at Afghanistan. We've got to act. Is a real troublemaker. We need to get rid of this thing. But it turns out, no, little bit harder than we thought. But then comes Iraq. This time, if we need to take care of this, we need a bigger stick, right? We need to be able to manage this. But when we hit that one, oh boy, we set back even worse, which means that finally, when it comes to Syria, well, we're kind of in a little bit more of a conservative posture. So I just love this cartoon for so many reasons, partly because all of us cartoonists, as Patrick was alluding to and Rob was alluding to, we can be funny and serious, sometimes both in the same cartoon, but underneath it all, we're dealing with very serious issues around the world, and we're trying to address them in palatable ways to engage our audience. So this cartoon I want to close because first of all, I love drawing caricatures, and this was, you guys all remember this meeting between Trump and Putin, and a lot of people were wondering what they said, and I had just got a transcript from this conversation. I thought I wanted to share it with you guys. Okay, so it starts off with Vladimir Putin saying, "Hello, Donald. I hacked your last election, attacking your most defining national institution, and I'm going to do it again, only this time with more precision." At which point Donald Trump says, "You had me at hello." So that, I suppose, is a good way of doing it. But I think the caricature, to me, that's really the really fun bit about the cartoon. So this cartoon I want to show you because there was, but Rob did some environmental cartoon. Everyone, the environment, we all have to stand up for Mother Earth, Mother Nature, because nobody else will. And so we do this. So this cartoon I did on Earth Day, you can see the first 2 panels is the mankind is kind of in the animate character, loving and kissing. But then the rest of the year, the way we deal with the planet Earth is basically like a giant soccer ball, right? That's the way we kind of deal with it. So it also shows that, like the animated GIFs that Patrick was doing and other work we've done. Now that we have digital opportunities, we want to use those for our cartoons, not just the stuff that we see in newspapers. Yeah, and then talk about the climate. So this is a serious cartoon. And this is the climate thing that we were talking about before, and also the COVID thing that Patrick was alluded to. Sometimes you do a good cartoon, a striking image can stick in somebody's brain in the same place, just alongside of where the funny part of the brain is. And then Patrick, I'm gonna leave this one to you. You said you wanted to talk about this cartoon.
Oh yes, I want to show a classic by KAL, an all-time classic. We should invent a word for that, a KAL-sick maybe. That's the cartoon that made you a rock star. It's a hit. I don't know how many times this cartoon was reprinted. It is so efficient. It is so good. I hope you made as much money as a rock star would have. But I think it's one of your timeless cartoons. And the good thing is, like a hit, like a song hit, you can use it over and over. It's always to the point and valid, right? When did you do this cartoon?
1989.
89. What crisis was that?
Oh God! I mean, there's been so many ever since then.
Exactly.
But I think it's the timeless nature of it. But also, one of the funny things was, Patrick, after it appeared, it started to reappear in other publications around the globe, and I started getting phone calls from stockbrokers all around the globe, and they all called and they said 2 things. First, they wanted a copy of the cartoon, and then they all said, "This is exactly what it's like," which really scared the pants off of me.
So you are telling us that just like a rock star, you got rich with this cartoon?
No, most of the money went to charity. So there you
No,
go.
he invested in the stock market, unfortunately. Yes.
All right. So I got one more cartoon here. Rob, this is your turn.
Yeah. Okay. So before we talk about this cartoon, I want to read something. I had the privilege of judging a couple of years ago when KAL won the Overseas Press Club, and this is how I described his cartoon. I said that KAL seems like a cartoonist transported by a bygone era. His impeccable pen and ink cross-hatching and weaponized bobble-headed caricatures look like something you'd see on a newspaper editorial page of a century ago, which seems fitting since the last time we saw a global pandemic on the scale of COVID-19 was 100 years ago. So anyway, that just to say that I think one of the things that's amazing about KAL is those bobble-headed weaponized caricatures. But this, I happen to pick one that I loved, that I saw recently, and I just loved it. And it's one of the ones where he doesn't use one of those amazing caricatures. By the way, that Putin Trump cartoon, brilliant. That's another timeless one now. But anyway, I just loved this idea. KAL's, I think we've all dipped our hands into animation, some more successful than others. And KAL has done an amazing job with his animated GIFs and also with his digital animation, which if you haven't seen it, check it out. But I just loved the idea of this cartoon, you know, the fish walking out of water, evolving, and then like, oops, you know, it just made me laugh. And I thought it was such a unique way to talk about the environment in this era right now. So kudos to you,
Well,
KAL.
thank you, my friend.
Great
Appreciate
job.
it. Appreciate it. Well, look, guys, let's see if we can get everybody else back in here, and everybody can see each other here in our kind of. And I'm going to call up some of our chats, see if we can get some questions from these people. But first, I'm going to open with a question for my colleagues. You know, people have no idea about our business, and often when we meet individuals, they have interesting, sometimes goofy questions to ask. What do you think over your career is the biggest misconception people have about what we do as cartoonists? Patrick, I'll start with you.
Maybe the fact that we're doing funny things. That's political cartoons is about funny, is about jokes, or I guess that's the main misconception. Whereas I think what is interesting in this job is that you can go through the full range of emotions with cartoons, from the simple, poignant, emotional image to the we've seen in the samples and of cartoons we have seen just before, all the diversity of what cartooning can accomplish. And so to me, the definition of a good cartoon is when you manage to strike a balance between the depth of the content and the lightness of the form. If you can manage to say something deep, but without being didactic, you know, with humor, or even with, if you can provoke laughs, but at the same time in a very light manner, that's the perfect cartoon to me.
Rob, what do you think?
You know, I agree totally with that some people think that cartoons have to be funny all the time. But the question I think that I get more often, or maybe not more often, but also frequently, is the question about where the ideas come from. Because I think a lot of people think that the editors just hand us, you know, say, draw this topic, and I want you to say this. And I think that, you know, maybe it's just they're not fluent in what editorial cartooning is about in terms of our editors and our publishers. But you know, I think they're surprised that we do it all. You know, oh, you mean you do the inking and you do the pencil and, you know, all of that, you know. And So I think that's a surprise to people that we come up with the idea too.
And that actually refers nicely to one of the questions brought up actually by another cartoonist, Kevin Necessary, who's talking about whether we regard ourselves, as cartoon journalists. And I think that's also a surprise to me, is that we often have to explain that really we wear many hats. And the first thing we're journalists first, then we're columnists, that we're doing commentary on the news. Then we're satirists, where we're using our commentary and adding humor to it. And then we're artists at the end of it. So really, everybody can tell by looking at us that we are the decathlon athlete of cartoonists, right? I mean, we have to have all of these skills to be able to do what we do, So I think that's really interesting.
We are strange
we do
animals.
have a couple.
Let's say
we are strange animals, and also just even conversing between us, you can see that each of us kind of approaches things in a little bit different ways. But there's a lot of obviously commonality in our craft.
I like to approach things with a French accent.
That's good. I would like to be able to do that too, if I could.
You can just try.
So we have, first of all, there's a few people in the comments, Rob, who are showing their great support for you and what a mistake it was about the Post-Gazette, and others who saw the whole thing and were pretty furious at the time. There is some question people ask. Another question we often get is about sacred cows and red lines. So, all right. So, well, I'm going to just start by saying that normally I tell folks is, I mean, there's some things, not that I don't think that we shouldn't be able to draw, but whenever there's lots of, touchy subjects that you want to make sure that you're treading carefully in those arenas, partly because we are commentators, as I pointed out, but we want to be effective commentators. And to be effective, we have to engage an audience. And if we do imagery, often the problems cartoonists get into is imagery. If they would do such inflammatory imagery, we can actually lose the conversation. But I'm curious about what you guys have to say. Patrick, why don't you start?
Just agree with you. Speaking from Geneva, Switzerland, I know something about sacred cows. Cows are sacred in Switzerland. So you don't do cartoons about cows, never. You don't do that. That's for one. And then, of course, there are taboos. They change over time. They change depending on where you work. To me, the real point is, when I'm tackling any issue, is what do I have to say? What is the core of the issue, and what can I add to the issue? And there are some issues, some themes where I don't have much to add, and they can be, they can be questions. I don't know. Let's take any topic: pedophilia, for example, pedophilia scandals. What can I add with a cartoon? It's hard to do cartoons on sad news or on good news. Everything that is in between is good material for cartoonists, I guess.
Rob, what do you think, bud?
I think that does sum it up in terms of like where you work and where you live. For instance, I was visiting Russia with a friend of mine back in the 90s, and we met this 100-year-old cartoonist, Boris Yefmanovich, I think is how you say his name. I'm bastardizing it, so I apologize. But anyway, he had this stack of cartoons, and they were all amazing. And he was, renowned in the field of cartooning. And he showed us a drawing where Stalin had actually put red lines and markers, marked on it, and he said, "Don't say this or this." And I was so naive. I asked the dumbest question. I said, did he ever do cartoons negative about Stalin? and my friend said, you're an idiot. He's still alive, isn't he? So we all have red lines. We don't all share the same ones, but clearly he had a long career because he never went against that red line. I think that, I think as American cartoonists, we like to pride ourselves on thinking that, it's free speech, absolutism, in terms of like, we should be able to say everything we want to say. But as humans, we all have our own filters, and I I don't like to do inflammatory images. You can't curse in a family newspaper, for instance. So my career, I had a lot of guidelines for myself, personally, and from the editors and publisher. So I think it just depends on where you are, but I do think it's our job to push the envelope. So it's the publisher and editor's job to say no. And so we've all done that, and I think that's the important thing. Now it comes down to, it's a private newspaper, right? They own it. They can publish what they want, and if they don't want that cartoon in there, they're going to say no. But I think we should always try to push it and say what we want to say. Doesn't mean we have to be tasteless or go overboard with something, but it is important to have that freedom.
Well, that your conversation about the Russian and American cartoonists conversing is that there's another old story joke about the Cold War, where an American cartoonist is talking to a Russian cartoonist, and where the American cartoonist says to the Russian cartoonist, says, "Look, in my country, we have freedom of expression. So that means I can draw my president whenever I want to." And the Russian guy says, "Oh, here in Russia, we've got exactly the same thing. We can draw your president whenever we want to." So anyway, so you're right.
Very true.
Well, yeah. And also, pertaining to that very same thing is that often a barometer in any country around the world about their freedom of expression or tolerance as a society is whether the cartoonists can draw their own head of state. And it's really a remarkable small amount of places in the world where that actually takes place. Now I'm going to bring in another question here, and this is from Eric Truant, who's talking actually about something that I think is really dear to you, Patrick, because he's talking about cartoonists doing non-traditional commentary using pictures. So not necessarily the comics that you see in the newspaper. You're in your introduction, Patrick, you call yourself a comics reporter. And you, Rob, I've seen you at conventions, political conventions, cartooning live and doing journalism there. So tell us a little bit about, first of all, the kind of things you do, but also your approach to cartooning in that way.
So who first, Rob?
That's a good question. Well, you guys shoot it out to see who's going to get this one first.
Well, I'll just quickly talk about, most of the time I'm sitting there drawing, the standard single panel editorial cartoon. But when I was going to these conventions, and the newspaper would send me every 4 years, it was so much fun to just get outside of that box and just report things and write about local things and other things. And I kind of did it differently every year. One year I was making little videos. One year I was just doing a blog when blogs were big. And then I started doing these long form comics toward the end, where I would take each day of the convention and write something about it. And usually they'd be, have a punchline and be funny, but not always. So yeah, it wasn't exactly comics journalism as much as it was just sort of me, riffing about the convention, but it was close.
Patrick.
Well, Cal, you should be answering this question because you have experienced all the forms possible, animations, 3D, theater, you've done everything. And just like you and Rob, I think the three of us are big believers in the power of the image. And for all the talk about the demise of political cartooning, the tool we are using, the cartoon, the very simple tool we are using, is very modern, and we can use it in so many ways. So I've been a reporter for the last 30 years, going to the field, reporting through comics. I remember, especially in these days, a story I did a few years ago, 1 year after Russia invaded South Ossetia. I was able to go to South Ossetia and to witness first the destruction that was still very visible, and the annexation of Russia and the Russian occupation of that part of the Caucasus. And of course, there's a lot of similarities with what's going on now. I've done, just like you guys, cartoons on stage. I think you can imagine all sorts of ways to use cartooning on stage, really like stand-up humor, but based on the power of cartoons. And cartoons take on a new life when you, just like you showed us, Cal, and I've been doing this for a long time, you decline your cartoons in different parts and you keep the punchline to the end. And that works very well with an audience. You can imagine all sorts of animation, and now with the smartphones, sort of interactive political cartoons where people swipe and have an effect on the development of the cartoon. There are so many things we can still do and that are yet to be done with cartoons.
Yeah, that's a great observation. There's some questions about how technology has affected us, and because we all started out, newspapers' natural home, cartoonists' natural home had been in newspapers, but it's just as you say, Patrick. We're really visual satirists is really where we are, and we're just finding new ways to harness it. The normal cartoons that people imagine are black and white were all started a couple of hundred years ago because the technology at the time was etching, ink on paper and stone and stuff. But now that we're broadening out, we shouldn't be scared. We're going to embrace it. This is so cool. And I suspect that there's more satire now than ever between, the television programs. And then as the internet has lowered the barrier to entry, there's all sorts of people who are doing their own satire, whether it's, word balloons on a photograph or their own little, riffs. But the challenge, though, however, for people like us and all future satirists, if you want to be paid to do this, you've got to be better than the ones on the internet, right? You've got to be able to.
And that's a point brought up by Patricia. Will cartoonists be paid in these new forms? Who pays?
I'll pay Rob. You pay Patrick.
Yeah, I'll start paying both of you guys to give me ideas. How about that?
No, but that's a very good question about the economy of it, especially when you talk about comics journalism. This has been a genre that has been emerging over the last 20 years. It's big now. A lot of media would like to have it, but when you come to them with a project, with a budget and with what it takes to actually go to the field, do the reporting, come back, take 2-3 weeks to come up with at least a magazine length story, it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Well, also into the same argument is Rob and I joined a fairly young group called Counterpoint, which anybody can join, counterpoint.com. And every day there's cartoons from the left and from the right. People get them as part of an email mailbox
Newsletter,
gift that they can see, a newsletter. They'll get it 2 days a week free, and then for a very small amount, you can get it every single day. But the idea is that this is the way people are consuming cartoons, and it's full of energy. It's really a lot of fun. I highly recommend it.
Yeah,
so,
and I just one other point. One of the other things besides Counterpoint I do is TinyView, which is an app for comics, which makes it available on your phone so you can scroll up and down instead of across, and it's really kind of a nice way to look at comics. So tinyview.com, just a plug.
Yes, and Eric Truand, who asked a question, is a French cartoonist taking part in a project called La Torche, and it's an application. It's a smartphone application for political cartoons. So
excellent.
There are new media.
So, and it looks like we have a few of everyone looks in the chat, they can see some links to those things. Well, our time is closing down a little bit here. It's been so much fun. But before we leave, there's something I want to share my computer again, because there's an event that took place just last week pertaining to cartooning that I think you guys will all find really interesting. All right, let me get back to the business of sharing the screen here. And we're going to bring you back up here and here, and let's get this thing going like this. Okay, so Patrick, tell us about what we're seeing here.
Oh, so that's something that happened a few days ago, May 3, and that day is, as you all know, the World Press Freedom Day. May 3. And that's the day we usually, with our foundation in Geneva, the Freedom Cartoonist Foundation, we give out our International Cartoon Award. And we had this ceremony 2 weeks ago in Geneva, and it was a beautiful moment, uplifting news for cartooning, because we were able to, that's the crazy dream we had, was to bring in there the 2 Nobel Peace Prize laureates. You know, something very special happened this year. The 2 Nobel Peace Laureates are 2 journalists, which is something that did not happen for the last 86 years. Maria Ressa from the Philippines, a global voice against big tech companies and what they do to democracy. And Dmitry Muratov, who's the incredibly courageous editor of Novaya Gazeta. So both of them, you'll have a picture where you see both of them on stage. We were able to get them in Geneva, which was a miracle, because up to 3 days before the event, we didn't know if they would be able to make it. So it was the first time they were reunited since Oslo last December, when they got their award. Both of them voices of courage. And the beautiful moment was to not only listen to them, to their very thoughtful keynotes, but then the 2 of them were able to hand the Kofi Annan Courage in Cartooning Award, which is the international prize of our foundation, to 2 cartoonists, Gabor Papai of Hungary and Vladimir Kazanevsky of Ukraine. Just with this event and this ceremony, we wanted to place the political cartooning in its larger role, in a larger picture, because let's remember, cartooning, political cartooning was part of the history of the fight for a free press. And it is a free press is a pillar of democracy. And I think that political cartooning is an important part of it. And having those people on the stage together with the 2 Nobels joining us was such a testimony to that fact, and such a great moment for our community. And I shall just add that we have an agreement with Cartoonist Rights Network International that you all know in the United States. And we're gonna alternate the awards. So next year will be the Rob Russell Courage in Cartooning Award from CRNI. And the year after that, we will be giving our award in Geneva. So 1 year in the US, 1 year in Europe. And we just want to give more visibility to political cartoonists and to our winners.
Patrick, thank you so much. That was so great. And what a great way to end our fun conversation, celebrating the potential of cartoons, the bravery of some cartoonists, and its full potential that we think is going to be with us for decades to come. So again, honoring our good friend, Rob Rogers. Thank you for coming. Great cartoonist from Pittsburgh. Patrick, as always, this was great fun, everyone. And I'm going to pass the microphone over to Patricia in the Overseas Press Club.
Well, this was really just a fascinating and inspiring program. And I just hope that, you know, with the demise of the newspapers being the biggest supporter of cartoonists, that you and the cartoonists of the future can make a living, and a great living, by doing what you love and what you do so well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.